6. So please welcome Mr. Leo Laporte.
Thank you all for being here. I noticed we've got tables now so people can blog this while we're talking. That's a scary thought. It's, one of the things, I sit in conferences too, I watch everybody. Nobody's listening to the guy talking. They're all blogging. They're all writing. And I think, oh, that poor speaker out there. But please, be my guest. Go ahead, play solitaire, anything you want. That's fine. Traditionally, keynotes are a way to set the agenda at the beginning of a conference, to talk about what's going to be important. And I think there are some really important issues for us as podcasters. Here we are in our second year, some say third year of podcasting. And we're starting to become a very different medium. And we have some real challenges ahead of us that we're facing. And I hope that we'll, over the next 2 days, we'll all talk about this. I know there'll be a lot of meetings. We'll be talking in the halls. And there's some things that are pretty important for us to deal with. And so I just picked 5 that I think are things I'd like to talk with you about. And I think the conversation needs to be, started. Number one, it'd be better if I stand over here. Number one, the name. And I know you're aware of what's been going on with the name. And, we've been talking a lot about it already yesterday and last night. Apple has gone after one of the sponsors of this event, Podcast Ready, for my pod, which is podcast software, and the name of the trademark Podcast Ready. And there's debate, and I've talked with lawyers, and we've talked about it with trademark people. There's debate over what Apple's trying to trademark. Apparently, they're claiming ownership of the word pod. And you know what? Most people, that's exactly the reaction. There's no way. And it's in the podcasting in the dictionary. There's no way. And I'm certainly not afraid of Apple. And I think if podcasts were a name worth defending, I'd be glad to defend it. But I've always had a little bit of a problem with podcasts. I know the name's not going to go away, by the way. I'm not crazy. I'm not Don Quixote. I know that this is going to stay a podcast. This will continue to be Podcast Expo. I don't think Apple's ever going to be able to take it away. But I think it's an opportunity for us to think about that name and whether that is a valuable name for us. I know you, and certainly I, meet people every day who say, oh, I would love to listen to your stuff, but I don't have an iPod. Now, maybe that's an excuse. Maybe that's just their way of getting out of it. But I really think that truly a lot of people think that a podcast has to be played on an iPod, or that you have to use iTunes to get it. Now, believe me, I'm very grateful to Apple, and I know Scott and Peter here, and I think the iTunes team is great, and they've put podcasting on the map in many ways. But podcasting existed before iTunes. It is not dependent on Apple. It is not dependent on iTunes. It's not dependent on the iPod. And I think we as podcasters really need to be clear about that and spread the word about that. It is not good for us for podcasting to be associated so closely with Apple. Thank you, Apple, for what you've done for podcasting. But I would like to see some other people step up to the plate. I'm very disappointed in Microsoft. I was hoping that the Zoom would support podcasting directly and explicitly. But you see, when there's a problem with the name, you're not going to see podcast on the menu on the Zoom, are you? There's no chance they're going to put that there. I was hoping Vista would support podcast aggregation. It will not. RSS will be built into IE7, but I don't know if it'll ever say podcasting. That hurts us. Because it means that, once again, people have one choice, or think they have one choice. And our big job going forward is to grow the audience. I'll get to that in a minute. So I think we should address this issue. I've unilaterally taken the opportunity to actually rebrand myself netcast. A lot of people don't like that name. It's something I thought of in the shower. But I happen to like it for a couple of reasons. One, it is a more accurate description of it. It's a broadcast or a cast. I think people understand what a cast is. That you get over the net. I think people understand what the net is. It doesn't imply a podcast. It doesn't imply an iPod. It doesn't imply iTunes. It's something you get over the net. It's a little more generic. It may be encumbered, although we're doing trademark work on it right now. There's a Swiss company that has a trademark in Switzerland that does not apply here apparently. Or anyway, there's some issues. Scott Warren, who has a lot of experience with this stuff, is looking into it and pursuing it. I like the name netcast because it is also kind of a pun. It's casting a net, which is, I think, what we need to do. We need to cast a net and invite people into what we do to broaden the reach. I'm not lobbying you to change your named a podcast. I'm not hoping that Tim will call this Netcast Expo. I don't expect he will call it Netcast Expo. I'm sure that at the world at large, it'll always be a podcast. But I think, first of all, we're mature enough that we don't have to have just one name. I think podcasting sometimes hurts us in another respect. One columnist said they should just call it Blathercast. There's a certain association in there with the word podcast. Just as blogs in some way hurts blogs. It was very beneficial to blogging to have a name, blogs, that everybody understood. But sometimes you don't want to be a blog. You'd rather be a website that has journal entries or something. You don't have to be a blog. And I think we're getting mature enough that we don't have to be a podcast. So I just laid that on the table. I think it's something we need to discuss. We did look into trademarking netcast. I wouldn't want to own that trademark. There is a movement, and there'll be a meeting later today to start an industry consortium. I think that's something that we very much need, kind of a podcasting consortium. If there were to be a trademark that we would go after, I agreed with Scott to fund the trademark. It's not $30,000, but to fund the trademark process, and then perhaps Scott's sitting right up here. I just committed to some spending. And then perhaps have that be owned by an industry consortium. Again, I don't want to impose this. It's certainly not going to come from me, but I think it's something we need to talk about today. Is podcasting the right name? Given Apple's assertion that it owns everything pod, is that a good thing? Is an Apple monopoly of podcasting a good thing? If RCA had owned television from day one, and if everybody who had a television thought you had to buy an RCA TV, it would not have been good for television. It's not good for us as a medium going forward. Just something to think of. Apple, I love you. I thank you for what you've done for podcasting. But the iTunes was both the best and the worst thing that ever happened to podcasting. It put us on the map, but now it owns us. And on the front page of the iTunes store, if you're not in that top 25, everybody thinks, by the way, that top 25 is the top 25 all-time podcasts. It is not. It's this week. But the fact that Apple can say that, put that up there, and everybody in the world looks at it and says, oh, those are the top 25 podcasts, is deleterious, I think, in the long run to all of us. So the fact that they can do that and there's no recourse, there's no other, podcast alleys here, there are a lot of other directories, but iTunes is too dominant. And I think that's always an issue. Okay, that's item number one. Item number two, the good news is this is a party. We love each other. We are in this together. This is a joint effort. We are in cooperation, not competition. And I think it's really important that we remember that. This is too youthful a medium for us to be fighting each other for listeners. We don't have to. That is not our job right now. Our job is to grow the audience in general. I don't think I have to say this. I think when I hear podcasters with other podcasters who would ostensibly in mainstream media be a competing podcast, have those people on and talk to them, I go, yeah, that's great. Because really, right now, it's not even co-opetition. I want to call it co-opetition, but it's not even that. I'm a competitive son of a gun. I want to beat everybody. That's my natural instinct. I want to be the best and number one, and that's served me well. And I know you're all that way too, or you wouldn't be successful. But we have to remember that right now, job one is not to make Twit number one, or to make Daily Source Code number one, or to make any other Keith and the Girl or Drew the job is to make podcasting or netcasting number one. And by doing so, we all benefit each other. So just a reminder that we're all in this together. I don't think I have to remind you. I look at this group and the camaraderie that's here is so great. What happens in mainstream media is it solidified, it fossilized. In the early days of radio, in the early days of television, there was a chance to experiment and have fun. There was early Kovacs, great stuff going on. It was very exciting. And then it became about money and suits and fossilized, and you get stuff that we can now make fun of because it's so god-awful, right? Now, Battlestar Galactica is a rare exception. I have to say it's wonderful. And there still is a chance for people like Aaron Sorkin at Battlestar Galactica people to do stuff that's great, creative, and unusual, but those are the exceptions, as we all know, to mainstream media, not the rule. Let's not become hidebound, fossilized old media. Let's really cherish this time we have right now in a brand new medium to experiment and grow. And it starts with working with each other, promoting each other, helping each other. We're all in it together. So I think that's really important for us just to remember. I don't think I need to remind you, but I just want to say it so I remember it, because I'm a competitive son of a gun. Our real job is to grow the audience.